the head of department, Dr. Harry Malila, and any members of the public. I'm going to ask now for the purposes of the record, if the members can please introduce themselves, starting with Member Bartman.
Good morning, Deirdre Bartman.
Good morning, Chairperson. Wendy Kaiser-Philander.
Morning, Chair, Premier and members and officials, Cameron Dugmore.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Premier. Good morning, DG. Good morning, everybody. Khalil Barangkais.
I don't see any other members online. Premier, if you may introduce yourself, and then Dr. Malila and then your team with you, please, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair and honourable members. It's a good opportunity to be with you. Good morning, Alan Windy.
Okay, good morning, and also good morning to all the members. Harry Malila, I'm the Director General of the province and also the Accounting Officer for the Department of the Premier. We've got the finance team primarily here, but I'm sure they can introduce themselves. So, Lucas, maybe we can start with you and then the rest of the colleagues.
Good morning, members and Chair. I'm Drigus Basson. I'm the CFO of Department of the Premier.
Renee?
I think Renee's just stopped off, sir. Is there anybody else who needs to be introduced?
Good morning, Chair. Hilton Arendse, Branch E Innovation.
Morning, Chairperson and members. Henriette Robson, Branch Corporate Assurance.
Thank you.
Andre?
I think that.
Andre, good morning. Good morning, Chair and members, Premier, colleagues. Andre Jumat, Corporate Services Centre.
Good morning, Louise Estreiser, People Management Practices.
Good morning, Lucas Buter, Legal Services.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think that's our team.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malila. So for the purposes of this meeting, can I ask all members to be muted to avoid background noises? As always, if you can flag points of order in the chat function in MS Teams, all video and audio to be switched off to improve the quality of the connection. And then to leave your mics off once you have finished speaking, and then to mute yourself only when you're not speaking. I'm going to ask now for introductory remarks. Mr. Premier, do you have any introductory remarks to open for us in the meantime?
Thank you very much, Chair. And a year ago in last year's adjustment budget, and thinking about where we were with the pandemic and just about to go back on the red list. And this year we find ourselves in a way better position. So, but of course, some of the
Chair.
You seem to be going through a bad spot there.
Of around 1%. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, yes.
Okay, thank you. So it's a reduction in our budget, about 1%, and I'll just take you through some of the high levels. So obviously, as I said, 19.998 million reduction. It's from the 1.825 billion down by just on 20 million. The shifting of the funds, mainly, if you look between votes, you'll see 38.394 million rand through budgetary shifts. There, primarily software systems, 1.335 million, Microsoft Cloud Computing, For health, you've got the Ministry of Mobility, that's a 6 million rand shift. You've got competency assessments at schools, a small amount, 575 million. My content, that's also about ECM management, 8.6 million. And the WCED information technology resources and services, that's another 3.4 million. 2 million was shifted to the Department of Economic Development. That's to supplement the operations of the EDP, and 950,000 rand shifted to DCAS, part of the safety plan. That's violence prevention at schools programs. There's some rollovers, 2.5 million rand. That's the citizen-centric culture in our Western Cape government culture journey. 4.252 million rand for ICT-related shifts in the Department of Health. 1.7 million rand rolled over from Transport and Public Works, part of the Modernization Infrastructure Refresh project. And then there's some budget alignment with compensation of employees, etc. But Chair, I think further than that, the detail will come out as we go page by page. But again, as I said, not that much of a shift. In actual fact, down by around about 1% of our budget. And then, Chair, I must apologise that I'm in a vehicle at the moment. I'm sure that you know that the Western Cape is playing host and partnering with the Northern Cape on the Green Hydrogen conference for the presidency. So at the moment, the whole team out in Saldanha, and then back for the conference in Cape Town this afternoon, or the press conference and the conference tomorrow. But thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Premier, and we accept your apology for being in the car. It's just that sometimes they're going through dead spots there on the R27. So unfortunately for that, but Dr. Melila, do you have any introductory remarks from your side?
Yeah, thank you very much for that, and thank you for the Premier to have provided the detail. We're ready to go into the issues. I mean, I've got Hilton here that can sort of also talk about some of the issues, particularly as it relates to Program 4. That's by far our biggest adjustment. A lot of that, I think Premier's touched on it, has to do, with some of the way leave applications in some of the municipalities, particularly Witzenberg, and then we also had some issues in Saldanha, but it's all on track now. And then obviously the 54 million that's been surrendered will go over to new MTF 2023 to make sure, obviously, that we give effect to all our initiatives, particularly under the broadband project. We've also, rolled out broadband to some of the most remote areas, particularly within the Peru area, and Hilton can give a little bit more detail to that. But I think as Premier has indicated, Chair, the shift in our budget is less than 1% of our total budget, and we're quite happy to present this to the committee. So, Chair, that's it from our side. We are open for questions and for comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Melila. So we are here to deliberate on vote 1, the Premier, Department of the Premier in the schedule of the Western Cape Adjustments Appropriation Bill of 2002. Members, if we can do this in block pages, in blocks of, the first block would be page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm going to open up for a round of questions. Just checking to see now if there are any questions here. Yes, Honourable Dugmore and Honourable Bartman. Honourable Dugmore.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I would just like to start off by excuse me, pointing to table 1.1, that is the payments and estimates per program and per economic classification. The issue of the compensation of employees is a decrease of 6.8 million. Can we actually get an understanding as to why there has been this decrease of COE of almost 7 million, and if these are because of vacancies that have not been filled, and why they were not filled? And then on page 3, table 1.2, which is dealing with environments and the shifting of funds, this whole reference to due to staff exits. If you look at the adjusted budget on page 3, there's R1 million which has been shifted due to this reason of so-called staff exit. Can you please just try and explain this? Because in subprogram 1.4, there is an amount of 15,000 being shifted because of staff exit. How does the department actually save, from these staff exits? And then on page 4, again on environment, strategic communication, shifting of the R1 million from savings due to the fact that the first Thursday radio shows are only being held quarterly now instead of monthly. Besides the concerns that we have in the way, communication expenditure is procured and spent, we also see further down in program 2.1 that there's 50,000 Rand going to be spent on 100 bicycles. In other words, about 500 Rand per bicycle. So, if could we get clarity? Are we correct in assuming that these bicycles are there, and also to fund the venues for the provincial top management and cabinet outreaches? Can we get an indication of exactly how much each of these bicycles cost? Are these second-hand bicycles? How much money will be spent on these bicycles, and what this amount is relative to the amount that is actually spent on the hiring of venues? Because in the 1 million saved on bicycles, as the budget stands, 50,000 is spent on 100 bicycles. So what is the 950,000 Rand then being spent on? My next question is on page 7, Chair, so I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Honourable Bartman.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, my question relates to page 5. I know there's a partial description of it on page 7, but I'll start with on page 5. Under subprogram 4.2, Strategic ICT Services, there was a transfer and subsidy to fund the establishment of additional e-centers, and it seems as if this transfer is coming from subprogram 4.4 regarding the CETA procurement delays. If you would allow me, Chair, one of the descriptions on page 7 for that, specifically for the page 5, speaks to the CETA procurement process being delayed. And when you combine that with the upgrade for the phase 3 network speeds, that comes to about 54 million Rand. So I just want to understand, because I know that the CETA program is a national program that we are also part of and rolling out in partnership. So I just want to understand what exactly are those delays, and is there nothing that we can do to expedite these? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Bartman. Dr. Milila, if you and your team want to answer.
Chair, thank you very much, and thanks for those two questions by Member Dugmore and Member Bartman. Let me maybe start with the question by Member Bartman, and maybe Driekus can just give a little bit of detail, but maybe I'll ask Hilton first to talk about it. There are many issues at CETA at the moment. The state of the State Information Technology Agency is not in a good state. In fact, we've got regular meetings with the head of CETA. They've also gone through some key management changes recently. So the previous sort of CEO of CETA, his contract came to an end, so he ended sort of his services with CETA. And between myself and himself, we had regular engagements. In fact, at the point in time, we've met monthly because there were some issues in the province relating to some of the major contracts, particularly within the education environment. And in fact, Chair, there's just been many issues, and all of this actually resulted in massive delays in some of the contracts which we need to procure via the CETA platform. We've even gone to the stage where we've even written them a letter where we now believe that on some of the stuff, they need to give us the authority to actually procure ourselves, because at the end of the day, all of this impacts on service level. And this is
exactly what has happened. And given the delays of CETA, we were not able to spend some of our funding. And I think, Chair, maybe a point that I also need to make is obviously the broadband contract. We also run that via CETA. CETA is actually the contracting party with Liquid, and obviously we are a partner to that. But generally, the issue at CETA is not where it's supposed to be. So given some of those challenges, we've also now taken some of that money and basically put it into the new year. But Hilton can also talk to some of the details. Chair, the e-centers, I think for Western Cape government, but that's not for Western Cape, for the people of this province, it's an absolute game changer. I mean, there are 70, I think we have 73 of them, Chair, and you can go to any of these e-centers and you can speak to people of this province and they will tell you how these e-centers actually help them either to create or either to access job opportunities or to access information, that could help them in either finding jobs or actually to improve their livelihood. So if there's something that I think we should build on as a government, then it's making sure that we can actually extend these e-centers into the most remote areas. In fact, we've got new plans. We even have plans to actually have a mobile e-center that can go into some of these remote areas, and that would actually assist many of the people in this province to do what they need to do. But I mean, if needed, then Hilton can do that. On the questions raised by Member Dugmore, Chair, staff, appointment of staff exits. I mean, staff exits is something that is quite difficult to manage and control. But really the issue around COE budgets is a major issue, not just in this province, but everywhere. I mean, our budgets are constrained. And what we've done as a provincial department, given the upper limits on COE, we've actually put together our own budget committee, where we actually, as soon as a post goes vacant, the manager doesn't have automatic approval to actually fill it. It goes back into the pool. And then as a departmental management team, we look at the entire department and we look at where are specific skills, capacity needed, and then we use those positions or those new vacancies or funding that have become available to actually fill those positions. And in fact, Chair, it's also part of our efficiency analysis. So any sort of savings that we have on staff, we can then actually employ that savings into other key areas in the department. And as I've indicated, it's very difficult to manage staff exits. I mean, we've got close to 1,000 staff members in our department. What we've also seen, Chair, particularly post the COVID environment, there's suddenly now also movement in terms of people moving different departments, even people exiting the system. So that is really our constraint. In terms of our capacity at senior management level, we've also had discussions, and there are moves afoot, to fill some of the positions in the department, but that will come through in the new budget. Chair, the same holds on the communication stuff. Obviously, the First Thursday program is a massive success in this province. We even have taken it now into remote areas where people can actually, come every first Thursday and have access directly to cabinet, to the premier, to ministers, to HODs. Even staff have access to, speaking to HODs, and also have access to myself, as the DG, if there are any issues that they would like to raise. So it is something that we would like to continue. We've now even taken it into some of the remote areas. So as an example, when we had our cabinet borsbraads, where cabinet and PTM broke away, we also used the opportunity to engage, with communities, to engage with people in different areas. Like the last one, we've been in Prince Albert, and you can only see the successes when you attend some of those sessions. So, Chair, that's one issue. If we talk about community engagements, if we talk about getting closer to communities, it is an area, that we are building on. Maybe, Driekus, you can just give a little bit more detail with regards to the bicycles. But the bicycles are just one example of obviously encouraging non-motorized transport. I mean, the committee is aware that there is a focus on mobility, there's a focus on transport, and it's one of those issues that we are dealing with. And then the shifts obviously to venues and, particularly for meetings of PTM, cabinet, etc. That's really just a shift, when we realize that maybe, our venue budget that we've allowed somehow is not enough. the committee must also realize that obviously the way that we budget in government, so we look at also what happened in the previous year in expenditure. And you may recall, Chair, last year, given the fact that it was COVID, we've almost didn't spend any money on venues. So now that everything has started to open up, it becomes very difficult because obviously there is a base that we work from, but we've got some room in our budget to move. But in aggregate, Chair, as I indicated, our budget moves 1% this way, that way on a close to 2 billion rand budget. Driekus, can you just maybe just give a little bit more details just on that bicycle cost and stuff like that? And I mean, Hilton, if you want to add, to the issue of CETA and the e-centers, you're most welcome to do so in summary. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just talk to the bicycles. Just to note, the 50,000 shift that Member Dagmore referred to is a portion of the cost. So bicycles, nowadays, you can't get a bicycle for 500 rand. It was 100 bicycles. It cost 400,000. So that's 4,000 rand per bicycle. And that was at the occasion of the Premier's Safety Cycle Tour in the West Coast. Those bicycles were handed over to the neighborhood watchers to assist them in their plight. And then DG on the, or Chairperson on the question by Member Dagmore also on the staff exits. You'll find all over pages 4 or 5, there's a common refrain that funds had become available for transfers to households. And what this simply means is that when a staff member exits, there are certain gratuities payable to the staff member, but because they are now a member of the public, we don't score that item as COE, we score it as a transfer to a household. So we don't naturally budget for those, but in the adjustments budget, we would then just create the shift from COE down to transfers to households. That's why you'll find it almost in every sub-program where there had been staff exits. Thank you.
Lucas, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Add something just on the e-centers?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, thanks, DG. So thanks. And there's two things that I'd like to add, DG, on the e-centers, that we're planning 2 e-centers in the metro, specifically in the high crime areas, and that our focus is now shifted from the rural into the metro. Of course, we need to have quite a few in the metro, and there's been an ask for that. And then as it relates to the issue of infrastructure and the delays of the infrastructure procurement, it's specifically for our E&S building that we have that we've moved our education department into, and then also for Grooteskier. So as DG just indicated, we've had significant engagements with CETA on this. We've sent a letter to the minister requesting permission to procure those goods and services ourselves, and we are waiting the outcome of the minister's letter. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, Hilton. Chair, I think those deals with the questions by the 2 members.
Thank you so much. I know that I'm going to allow that follow-up, but before I say, may I ask the department for if you could keep your answers concise, as we only have the scheduled time of 45 minutes. If it's a longer answer, we can always ask for written responses. But Honourable Dagmore, your follow-up question.
Yes. Thank you. No, thanks for the clarity around the cost of the bicycles, which appears to amount to 400,000 at 4,000 a bike. Can I just ask the Premier, I mean, the issue of allocating only West Coast CPF's bicycles for 4,000 Rand, as opposed to all the other CPFs in all the non-metro and metro regions? I mean, how can that be justified? Is this going to be another blue dot exercise where you start something and then you stop it and there's no equity in terms of actually allocating? I mean, is this essentially just about electioneering, or is there a commitment to actually deliver bicycles to all CPFs across the province?
Mr. Premier?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to the honourable member for the question. If you actually have a look at how this government has handed out bicycles over the last years, you'll see that across the province that their bikes gone to neighbourhood watchers, they've gone to healthcare workers that deliver medicines, they've gone to school children for mobility mobility. So over the years, they get spread across the province. It is not only one space, and I can assure you it's not electioneering. It is about mobility and modal shift in our province, and it has always been like that from day one. And so, absolutely. And then I'm not sure if the honourable member wants a discussion on Blue Dot. I'm very happy to have a discussion. 215 million rand going into a pilot project, and it was always launched as a pilot project. In actual fact, extended once. I must say there's a lot of interest from the OECD and the KfW Bank in Europe. The local universities are studying it as a behavior change model, as well as how do we find a way to subsidize or to incentivize in some way the taxi industry, which moves more people than trains and moves more people than buses in South Africa at the moment. And that's why this pilot project was put in place. Of course, I would love to be able to roll it out across our whole province to every single taxi operator. I think, imagine if every taxi operator had this system where the vehicle was microchipped, we could check the speeds and whether they were on track on their route or not. Of course, linked to customer behavior, customer reporting, and citizen reporting. It would actually be amazing. The problem is that we ran the pilot project for 215 million with 800 taxis. To roll it out to all 16, 17,000 taxis, you can just imagine that would run into many, many billions of rands. And so that's why it has to now be handed over at a national level so that national can have a look at the feasibilities. And that's exactly what we've offered. We've said, here's our pilot. Why don't, we're happy that it can be rebranded. We're happy that it can change. This is what we have come up with in that Blue Dot process.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Premier.
Okay.
Thank you. Honourable Dugmore, can we move forward?
Chair, the Premier did indicate, and just as, if we wanted to engage, and I'm aware of the time issue, but I want the Premier to please respond to this, that in our discussions with Santaco, they indicated, yes, there had been a second extension, but it was initially agreed that it would be extended to the end of this financial year, which would have been another 40 million. But clearly that wasn't extended. Money has been adjusted to other purposes, whereas the commitment made with the second extension was to actually extend it until the end of this financial year, in other words, March. And the protests and that which happened, therefore, need to be borne by the provincial government or whoever was doing the negotiations with Santaco, because the second extension was initially committed to the end of the financial year, which would have been an amount of 40 million rand, and also to ask whether he's aware of the pilot and is in Durban, and whether the province has learned anything from that pilot.
Thank you. This is not part of the vote, members. So I'm going to ask that the Premier would furnish us with a written response, and then we can continue with our vote discussion. So if the Premier could give us a written response to that question, and then we can further divulge that in another forum. I'm going to ask for questions for pages 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Member Dugmore?
Thank you, Chair. Once again, just in regard to on page 7.
Yes.
Again, can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. There's the issue of 6.3 million shifted to vote 10, the issue of the Office of the Minister for Mobility, and that has been reported on before. So if in that regard, the Premier can just indicate, or the DG, when will the MEC for Mobility actually, have his own office? And then if you look at Centre for E-Innovation, there's an amount of 20 million, but more shifted from health for the Microsoft Azure cloud system. Now, our members have gone, for instance, to the Khayelitsha Hospital, where the board pleaded with our members and through them to the MEC of an amount of 30 million that was required. In fact, sorry, 150 million in terms of the hospital's needs. Here we have an amount of 20 million shifted out of health to the cloud computing services, whereas that particular community, I don't even want to talk about Jursta Hospital, where promises have been broken in regard to getting that hospital up and going. So how can it be justified that 20 million goes from health to the Azure cloud computing services, whereas there's absolute physical and infrastructure needs in a hospital like Khayelitsha? How can that just be justified?
Thank you. Dr. Malila?
Chair, thank you very much. On the first question, the new or the MEC mobility, that is 1 April 2023. We are sort of already en route with regards to establishing those 2 million Azure accounting services, cloud computing services. We're doing certain things from e-innovation on behalf of other departments. Obviously, we didn't just shift the money. This is by agreement with the accounting officer of the Department of Health, where we incur certain expenditure. We do so incur certain commitments, and they then agree to pay for it, and we use the adjustments estimate to actually deal with the shift. Chair, the other issues with regards to infrastructure requirements in either Khayelitsha or the issues around, Jursta, I mean, that is something I think that the Department of Health need to deal with as part of the annual budgeting process. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That concludes our discussions on page 7 till 12. Member Bartman?
No, Chair, since you indicated that the discussion on that is concluded, I wanted to move for view on the vote.
Okay. We haven't gone through pages 13 to 20, but we can move on the vote. Is there supporter is there someone to support the vote?
Sorry, what's happening? Chair, could you just indicate what's happening now?
Sorry, we're going to move.
Someone moving for adopting the vote right now?
Yes.
Okay. Chair, there's just 1 or 2 other issues. I'm aware of the 45-minute time constraint, but could I just ask my last questions?
Okay, you can ask one more question. Member Bartman? No. Member Dugmore?
No, that's in order, Chair. Let Member Dugmore go, and then I will indicate later.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Member Dugmore?
Yeah, Chair, I think we know that the staffing in the Children's Commissioner has always been an issue, and here we have, if I'm not mistaken, an amount of almost just over 2 million, which has not been spent in increasing the capacity in the Office of the Children's Commissioner. Which could we get an explanation as to why that has not happened? And then I see there's extra money allocated to the Western Cape Economic Development Partnership. Can I just ask what necessitated additional funding, whereas there had been an initial allocation to the Western Cape Economic Development Partnership? Was this for a particular project? Could we get some more clarity specifically on that? Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Malila?
Chair, on the issue of the Children's Commissioner, the funding that we're not going to spend this year, that will go over to the 2023 year. I mean, she's got challenges with recruiting people. I mean, Chair, she's gone through numerous processes and not finding the correct candidates for what she requires. I mean, it is a new office, so there are specific requirements, particularly in relation to people's qualifications. But it's not for a lack of trying, Chair. And I mean, the Children's Commissioner is quite active in this space. And I mean, I also want to put it on record that between the Premier and I and the Children's Commissioner, I mean, we've got an institutionalized support structure, and there's no issue there. So it's really just an issue of not finding the correct candidate. There's also another issue with regards to the Children's Commissioner that contributes to this, is obviously the issue around permanent accommodation. they have identified an office building that belongs to government. But when they wanted to move in, there were tenants in there, and the department had to go through a process, obviously, to get the tenants out of the building in a legalized process. But now they have identified a different building in the new year. So hopefully in the new year, Chair, it will improve, but that money has been earmarked for the new year. In relation to the EDP, this is really for additional institutional capacity support. I mean, the EDP has been actively engaged with communities, particularly during the COVID period. They had to obviously get additional support to make sure, that the food systems structures is in place to deal with people that are vulnerable, and particularly communities, across the entire province. And for that, we had to obviously support them just with additional, capacity and institutional support funding. So there are no specific project as it relates to that. Chair, that's the response in relation to those two. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malila. With that, we have come to the end of the report in the handbook, in the book. Can I ask for someone to move the support the vote? Member Bartman?
Thank you, Chair. For this particular vote, for vote 1 of the Premier, I move that this vote thus be tabled and that we support this vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Philander.
Thank you, Chair. I second the support and the notion expressed by Member Bartman to support vote 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Dugmore? Member Dugmore? Member Dugmore, you're on mute, sir?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Chair. Chair, the one thing that we haven't done yet before coming to the issue of supporting the vote or not is the issue of resolutions. Do you plan to have those after the adoption, or can we deal with that before?
I plan to have the resolutions after the adoption, sir.
After? Okay,
Yes.
well, okay. Well, if I could just indicate then on behalf of the ANC, if the Chair could note the minority view of the African National Congress not to support the budget in line with Rule 90. We don't support this budget because it spends too much money on venues for cabinet jaunts, and does not provide detail in regard to the various expenditures, such as the Western Cape Economic Development Partnership, and has also prioritized cloud computing above the infrastructure needs of the Khayelitsha Hospital. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. In terms of Standing Rule 90, then the ANC has expressed its minority view that they do not support the vote. Thank you so much. I would like to thank the Premier and the departmental officials and Dr. Malila and his team, and if there are any members of the public for this discussion. Sir, you are free to leave as we will be deliberating on other reports of the committee, and you are free to go about the business of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the honourable members. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks also to the team. Thanks, Prem. Bye.
I'll just give them a minute to leave. Thank you very much. Members, we are now going to consider and adopt the committee meeting minutes of 11 October. That was distributed by the presiding officer, the procedural officer, Ms. Kamish Ahmed.
Sorry,
yes.
Point of order. I think we must finish the business of the adjustment vote, Chair. Request
okay. So you broke up there a minute. What did you say, Member Dugmore?
I'm saying, Chair, I asked earlier about resolutions of the committee, particularly in regard to information requested, and you said we would deal with that after a decision had been made on whether to adopt the vote or not. Now I see that you're going on to another report. So could we please just finish off this adjustment with requests for information?
Okay, that's in order. Would you like to make a resolution, sir?
Just a request for information. Firstly, if we could have a breakdown of the additional funds allocated to the Western Cape Economic Development Partnership as to exactly what those funds will be utilized for. Secondly, if we could have a full report as offered by the Premier of all bicycles allocated, allocated to various initiatives, including neighborhood watches, community police forum, health workers, and if that report could also include the issue of monitoring and evaluation of those bicycles, how that is done, and where the ownership of these bicycles actually resorts, the ones that have been handed out. Thank you.
Thank you, procedural officer. Have you noted that those resolutions, ma'am? Yes, she has. Thank you so much. So let us move on to the meeting, the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, the 11th of October.
Chairperson?
Yes, Member Bartman.
Before we move on to the minutes, we do need to adopt the report on the vote because it will have to go to the Budget Committee tomorrow. And the report is on the vote that we adopted, just to make sure that our views are correctly reflected. Thanks.
Sorry about that. I apologize. So can we adopt the report on the members? Sorry, can we adopt the draft report on the Western Cape's appropriation budget vote 1 for the Department of the Premier?
Yes, Chair, with our Rule 90 reservations noted. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Seconded. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Bartman. That report is so adopted. Now, can we move to the minutes of the meeting on the Tuesday, the 11th of October? Are there any comments, any adjustments, any changes to be made, members? If not, can I have someone to move the minutes, please? Member Philander?
Move to adopt, Chair.
Thank you so much, Member Bartman.
Seconded.
Thank you so much. That concludes the deliberation on the minutes of the meeting of the 11th of October. And now we consider and adopt the draft committee report on the annual report for the Department of the Premier. This was also circulated to all members. Ms. Kamish Ahmad, if we could flight that report, please. There it is. Any questions on pages 1 through 4? I'll give you a minute to peruse the report while Ms. Kamish Ahmad goes through the different pages. If there are no omissions and exceptions omitted, can I ask for a mover of the report, please?
So, sorry, Chair.
Yes, Member Dugmore.
For that, I note that in regard to information requested, there is a gap in regard to the date, and I would like to suggest that that information, and given that we will, from having adopted this report, communicate with the department, that the information requested would be provided to us by the 15th of January, 2023.
15th of January 2023. I believe that would be in order. Are there any objections to that, Member Bartman?
No objections. I move to adopt with the amendment, Chairperson.
The move to adopt the amendment is so noted. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Seconded accordingly, Chair.
Thank you, Member Philander. That concludes the adoption of the committee report on the annual report. Are there any further resolutions that any members would like to note?
None, Chair.
No, no, Chair.
None,
If
Chairperson.
there are no further, sorry, Member Fernanda. If there are no further resolutions or actions, thank you very much for the time spent on this meeting. Thank you for keeping to the time. I really appreciate that, members. Enjoy the rest of the day, as we know that there are lots more meetings to come today. So may we have a fruitful day together in deliberation of these adjustment budgets. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair. Goodbye.
Thank you, Chair. Goodbye.